Let's talk about the quadratic formula. Previously, we covered how to solve a quadratic equation by factoring. In this video, we'll talk about how to use the quadratic formula to solve a quadratic equation. This is really useful because some quadratic functions, in fact most quadratic functions, don't factor nicely or at all, but the quadratic formula always works. The quadratic formula says that if we have an equation ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, then the solutions to this are given by this messy formula: x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. You should memorize this. You should know this. Practice it now. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. Pause the video, say it again. Make sure you know this. What can we do with this? Well, if we go ahead and write this as x squared minus 2x plus 1 equals 0. Remember, we want all the terms on one side of the equation so that this looks like ax squared plus bx plus c. In this case, we have a equals 1. There's an invisible 1 right here. B equals minus 2. And c equals 1. And what we can do is we can plug this in to the quadratic formula, which says that x equals, say it with me, negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all divided by 2a. And since we know the values of a, b, and c, we can just plug them into this equation and get our answers. Let's give it a shot. In this case, x equals negative b, that's going to be negative 2, or positive 2, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, all divided by 2 times a. If we simplify this a little bit, that's 2 plus or minus the square root of 4 minus 4 all over 2, or even simpler, 2 plus or minus the square root of 0 over 2. Plus or minus just means that this is actually two equations, 2 plus the square root of 0 over 2, and 2 minus the square root of 0 over 2. We'll notice that the square root of 0 is just 0. 2 plus 0, we're looking at 2 over 2, which is 1. Because we get the same answer for both of our roots, this equation only has one solution, x equals 1, which is exactly what we got when we did this earlier. Let's try another one. This equation is already in the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. In this case, a equals 3. B is a negative number, negative 2, and c equals negative 3. X equals, say it with me, negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all divided by 2a. Let's plug in what we know. Negative b, that's positive 2, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, all divided by 2a. If we simplify this a little bit, that's 2 plus or minus the square root of b squared, that's 4, minus 4 times 3 times minus 3, that's going to be plus 36 all over 6, or equivalently 2 plus or minus the square root of 40 all over 6. At this point, it's helpful if we split this up into two solutions. X equals 2 plus the square root of 40 over 6, and x equals 2 minus the square root of 40 over 6. At this point, there's some further algebra and simplification that we could do here, or alternatively, we could just type this in a calculator. For the first one, we get x is approximately equal to 1.387, and for the second one, we get x is approximately equal to negative 0.721 to 3 decimal places. Last one, again, ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. We have a equals 2, b equals negative 3, and c equals 5. Say it with me one last time. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. This time, when we plug everything in, we get negative b, that's positive 3, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, all divided by 2 times a. Simplifying this, that's 3 plus or minus the square root of 9 minus 40 all over 2 times 2, which is 3 plus or minus the square root of negative 31 over 4. Hold up. The square root of negative 31, can we take the square root of a negative number? In this class, no. No, we can't. And so we don't need to split it up into 3 plus the square root of negative 31 and 3 minus the square root of negative 31. We don't need to do any of this because the square root of negative 31 does not exist. We can write that as d n e. That tells us that this equation has no solution. There are no values of x that make this equation true. And that's fine. When we're solving quadratic equations, there's 3 possibilities: that we have no solution, that we have 2 different solutions like the last problem, or that we have only one solution repeated, which we saw in the problem before that.